Jeff.
Okay, I probably won't be as few words, sorry, in advance, because I'm older, I've been around longer, so I have a longer history.
From New York, and we always go on and on.
But I'm Jeff Sass, so today I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of .club Domains, which is one of the new domain extensions. So instead of .com or .biz or .org, you can get a domain name that ends in .club. But I started my career in New York in film and television and spent 14 years doing pretty much everything you could possibly do in the industry. I started out at a company called Satori Entertainment, and we were mostly in the distribution business and were importing English-speaking foreign films for distribution in the US. So films from Australia, New Zealand, and Great Britain. So I spent a lot of time when I was very young, fortunately, going to film festivals all over the world for the purpose of acquiring movies to bring and distribute and show in the US. And we also produced a talk show on cable television called Celebrity, which I started out as a PA on and then eventually became producer of that show. And that show was hosted by Allison Steele, who was a radio DJ, and we interviewed, celebrities when they were promoting their movies, everyone from Robin Williams to Jane Fonda to Christopher Reeve and hundreds of other celebrities. So that was a great experience. And after I left Satori, I started my own company called Illustrious Entertainment, and we produced one special for CBS. It was a clay animated and live action special called My Friend Liberty, which was in celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty. So this goes back a number of years, but it was a lot of fun. And then, of course, had a falling out with our partners, and that company fell apart, and I went to work for Troma. So as some of you may have heard of Troma before, how many people in the audience have heard of Troma before? So a few of you. Troma is probably the world's oldest independent film studio. They're 44 years old and still going strong, and best known for some wild and crazy movies like The Toxic Avenger. And I worked at Troma for 7.5 years. I worked on The Toxic Avenger Part 2 and Part 3. I co-wrote Sergeant Kabuki Man NYPD, and worked on a number of other movies, and also helped create The Toxic Crusaders, which was a cartoon spin-off of The Toxic Avenger, and then went on to start our licensing and merchandising division based on the Toxic Avenger, the Toxic Crusaders. So it was a crazy time. And when it comes to marketing, I wrote a book recently called Everything I Know About Business and Marketing I Learned from the Toxic Avenger. And this is actually kind of a funny marketing book where I go behind the scenes and share a lot of the lessons I learned from making these crazy movies. But the lessons are things that you could apply to any business or even to your personal career. So they're legitimate lessons wrapped around some crazy stories from going behind the scenes of these independent films. And finally, I'll just say as a fun fact, when I left Troma in 1994, they hired James Gunn to replace me. So if you're a fan of James Gunn and Guardians of the Galaxy, you could sort of thank me for quitting. But no, he would have had all the success he's had without me. He's very talented. But that is my long-winded introduction. I did warn you in advance it would be long-winded. So
as you see, we have a depth of knowledge up here. So this is called press coverage for your indie film. But I think we can all agree that we live in a world where it's going to be social media marketing coupled with traditional marketing. So I'm going to hand it off to Jeff. Jeff, can you talk a little bit, since you've been around a while, about how you've switched things up from traditional press coverage to incorporating social media, and at what point in the filmmaking process should people start reaching out?
So it's really interesting. I mean, obviously things have changed dramatically from when I started out. To give you an idea, at Satori, when we did a press release, you would mail press releases on Friday, so they would arrive at the publications by the end of the day, Monday or Tuesday morning, because typically they would publish the articles on Wednesday. And when I say mail, I literally mean that, on a Friday afternoon, if we had a press release about a movie opening, everyone in the company would be in there stuffing envelopes and sticking them in mailboxes. This was literally snail mail. So obviously today things have changed dramatically. With social media and the internet in general, everything is instantaneous, right? So you have the opportunity to get things out, which is both a blessing and a curse, because things move so quickly that they don't have the same impact necessarily. Everyone has a short attention span. It's no longer a short attention span syndrome. It's common. Everyone has it. So it's easier to get things out. It's harder to get attention with it. But one of the things that's changed that's really great, if you take advantage of it, is access to the reporters and access to reviewers. Back in the old days, there were a handful of famous reporters working for the newspapers, and it was very hard to get to them. Today, especially with online publications, when you read a review, even at something like the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, oftentimes the reviewers, not only their name, but potentially even a link to their email address or a way to contact them is right there. So I think when it comes to press, what's really changed is you have the opportunity to leverage social media to develop, no matter who you are, you don't have to be known yet, you have the opportunity to reach out to and contact and slowly but surely try and develop relationships with the people who write about movies, with the people who might write about your project in the future. And again, as with social media 101, you don't reach out the first time to one of these people and say, hey, I got a great new movie and I want you to hear about my project. You have to develop a rapport over time. So you might start out by reaching out, hey, I read this article you wrote, or I really agree with your review, and this is what I liked about it. And don't even pitch anything. Just subtly just build that rapport. And that's, basics for social media, for Facebook, for Twitter. When you're engaging with people, just like at a cocktail party, you don't walk in and the first thing you say to someone, hi, I'm Jeff, would you buy my book? They're not going to listen. You say, hi, I'm Jeff. What do? You establish rapport, and maybe you don't even mention the book that time unless they ask, and you mention it later on. So I think those same things apply, but you have the opportunity to actually connect with the media in ways that was much harder in the past.
So, Jeff, in terms of specific ways that you find and then interact, aside from sort of not selling them your book as soon as you pitch them, what are some strategies that people can take away so that they can identify potential people to cover their films and then interact with them?
Well, of course, hashtags are very powerful, both to use hashtags to get people to notice your content and also to use hashtags to discover content. And it's important to think about, the one great thing about social media and the film industry is it's a visual medium. So you have the opportunity to push out tons of content. When we were making independent films back in the 80s, we always had a still photographer on set, but that still photographer was capturing stuff that would be used after the film was done for promotion. Today, virtually everyone on set is a still photographer, and you have the opportunity to push out so much content on an ongoing basis so that you're creating that interest and demand beforehand. So that's very helpful. But when you think about hashtags, think about who is it you're really trying to reach, not just what the content is. And I think a lot of people make the easy mistake of just hashtagging things based on the content, but you want to hashtag things based on who you want to read it. So what is a hashtag that they're going to be following, someone who you would want to see it. So if your film is a documentary about a particular field, you want to hashtag it in ways that people who are interested in that field are going to find that content. So that's really important. And another thing I want to mention, which is kind of if you don't mind me going on a little bit, a little tip which is really interesting. So because social media now gives you the opportunity to target in ways that was never really easily available. And targeting for your customers in the film industry is very interesting, because when you think about it, if you're making a film, you have to figure out who your audience is. And your audience is not necessarily the people who are going to watch that movie when it's done. If you are going to be seeking distribution for your film, right? If your goal is not just to throw it up on YouTube yourself, but actually to try to get it distributed, whether that's in theaters or whether that's at festivals or whether that's through a streaming service, then you actually have two audiences for your project, right? The first audience is the decision makers of distribution, right? Before you can worry about the consumer watching your movie as a fan of your film, you need to worry about getting that film noticed and in front of the people who can make the distribution decisions for you, right? So going back to making movies, in the 80s and 90s, our primary market was theatrical films, right? Getting them into theaters. But then the home video industry came along, right? Everyone knows, some of you may remember VHS tapes, most of you are familiar with DVDs, but it was very interesting because back in the early days of home video, to get more money for an advance on a film, if it had a theatrical release, you would get 10 times more. It was the difference between a $20,000 advance or a $200,000 advance, literally, just if the movie had played in theaters, right? But of course, for an independent studio, it was very expensive to do a national release, right? Just the print costs alone are prohibitive if you're opening up in thousands of theaters. So what we would cleverly do is we'd figure out where the buyers were for the home video companies. And it turned out there were 5 cities in the US that were not big movie-going cities necessarily. They weren't New York and Los Angeles. They were Minneapolis and places like that where the buyers lived for those video companies, right? So we would, at a very low cost, release our films in those 5 markets, at a fraction of the cost of a national release. So that when those buyers drove to work and passed the theater, they saw our film. When they picked up the newspaper, they saw ads for the film. And we're pattern driven. So if you see a movie playing in a theater in your hometown, you assume that movie's playing in a theater everywhere, right? So these guys just assumed we had a national release. And we would get the credit for the theatrical release from those 5 cities and get the $200,000 instead of the $20,000 by having that theatrical release. So we pay $30,000 or $45,000 to open in those 5 cities, and the return would be significant. So what does this have to do with social media today? Well, you can apply the same thinking when you think about the way you can target where your content goes in social media. When you use things like Facebook and Instagram, especially if you do some small paid advertising, you can really get very granular in that targeting. So suppose you're trying to get your film into a particular festival. Well, maybe you should be doing targeted advertising in the market where the headquarters of that festival are. Maybe you can be targeting, even without them knowing it, the executives, who run that festival, because there are ways to do that. There are things like that are called custom audiences on Facebook, where you can actually, if you can get people's email addresses, you can upload their email addresses, and if it matches a Facebook account, those ads will be shown to that person. They don't really know that they're being targeted in that way. So you can think about ways you can leverage these targeting capabilities to make sure that the people you need to know about your project, are exposed to that content. So it's a different way of thinking about it, but I think first and foremost, and then I'll shut up, sorry. First and foremost, understand that you might have 2 different audiences, right? You have the audience that's going to go see and love and enjoy your project when it's completed, but before that, you have the audience of your distribution outlets. They're your first customer, right? Not the person buying tickets to go see the movie. Your first customer is who's going to give you distribution, and how can you leverage social media to target those people.
So I'm going to ask a question that might be a little bit taboo. So before I do that, do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, sir, in the blue shirt.
In terms of marketing, what about viral marketing? Because nowadays, because it's such a big pond nowadays where everyone's promoting their things. Do you have any advice for unconventional marketing, like viral marketing, to actually get people interested? Like, for example, putting flyers up in random places to have people scan a QR code. Put a little mystery in it so they're more inclined to actually investigate what it is, as opposed to, another ad, another ad, another ad.
Yeah.
Jack, do you have thoughts on that?
No.
First of all, I wouldn't call it viral marketing. Viral is the outcome, right? No one knows how they can guarantee something's going to be viral. That's an outcome. What you really want to think about, as you alluded to, is doing things that are creative, doing things that are non-traditional, and perhaps they will become viral, they will go viral. But most of the things that have become viral, if you ask that person or persons, beforehand, did you know that was going to happen? What did you do to make it go viral? They have no freaking clue, right? But doing things that are creative and out of the box are a great way to get attention, and certainly you would be increasing your odds of something going viral by doing that. Another way to get attention is something that's called newsjacking, which I think is a term that was coined by David Meerman Scott, who's an author, I think he's written a book by that title, Newsjacking, so you should read it. But newsjacking is being aware of things that are happening currently and finding a way to attach your story to it so that you can ride the wave of that information. So if your film is on a particular topic and something happens in the news that's related to that topic, can you put out an announcement? Can you reach out to the media and say, hey, I'm an expert in this area because I've actually been researching a film on it or whatever, and try to ride that wave of news that's happening outside. So that's a good way to grow attention and capitalize on what's actually happening in the real world. So you should always be having Google alerts and things for all different topics that are related to your project, so that you don't have blinders on and you're not just thinking about your responsibilities for your project, but you're aware of what's happening in the world that may be related to your project and its topic.
Okay, here we go. Free content. What are your thoughts in terms of putting free content out there to bring folks back? But I think you want to actually make money at some point in the venture, right? So, Jack, do you have thoughts, or Jeff, on terms of how much free content do you put out there? Do you target that free content? And how do you leverage free content for maximum return financially?
So on the free side, so I'm a big proponent of giving away stuff for free in a controlled fashion. I have a chapter in my book, literally, on this topic, called Working Freelance. And obviously, and sometimes when you're working for free or doing something for free, you may not be getting paid in money, but you may be getting paid in experience. There are other things you're getting out of it. It could be experience, it could be exposure. I think how much you give away for free also depends on the medium. So with a book, there's not as much expense into it as a film. So I actually make chapters of the book available every week or so. I publish a new chapter on the book's website and on Medium. So, eventually the entire book will be available for free if you're willing to go through the trouble of, going post by post, chapter by chapter. And I think that's fine. And the belief there is, along the way, if someone's getting value out of it and likes what they're reading, they're going to buy the whole book or talk about it or review it. So I don't mind. With a film project, obviously you've invested much more money, not necessarily time, but more money than I've invested in publishing a book. So you may not want, obviously you're not going to want to give away necessarily the finished film if it's a real commercial venture. But you have this tremendous opportunity to give away other content along the way, more than ever before. Again, we talked about the power of social media. We talked about the fact that everyone, including your cast and crew, has a studio in their pocket. So when you think about the bonus material that used to be on a DVD, all the behind-the-scenes stuff, well, there's no reason to wait for the DVD to put out that bonus material. You could be putting out bonus material while your project is still in production. You could be doing interviews with the stars. You could be doing behind the scenes stuff. You could be pushing out all that content for free and make it valuable. Don't make it just promotional like a trailer, but get into some of the nitty gritty. Deal with some of the issues you're facing as an independent filmmaker. Put out content that's going to have value to people for free, that's related and going to drive them to your commercial product, right? And it's easier to do that now than it ever was. Of course, the challenge still is getting attention. But in terms of the ability to push that content out, you should be doing it constantly.
I would love to hear from the audience. Do any of you have any thoughts on free content and putting free content out, or any other questions?
For the free content and leaking stuff, of the sense of giving people a taste of what you have. Going back to the lecture we had previously about ideas possibly sometimes being stolen by the really big publishing areas or the big studios, do you have any ways to counteract for, like, there was a movie years ago called Big Fat Liar, if anyone ever remembers it. The kid, he wrote an essay, he happened to leave the essay in a scumbag producer's car, he stole the essay and wrote a movie about it. And didn't give him any credit. So if you just release the movie piece by piece, and worst case scenario, a studio sees it and says, "Oh, hey, we can make a movie like this," and just basically rip off your idea. Do you have any ways to counteract that?
Well, first of all, if you release it through a public channel that there's a record of, you have clear evidence of when the timing was and that you released it. It's a catch-22, and people have lots of different opinions about it because ideas are a dime a dozen. I guarantee you that in this room, several of us have had pretty much the same idea, have ideas in our heads that are very similar, right? So ideas, while it's great to have ideas, it's the execution of those ideas that make a difference, right? And getting your ideas out there. And sometimes, in life, if you're so precious about keeping your ideas a secret and treating them like they're precious and never telling anyone, you're limiting the opportunity and chances of those secrets actually coming into fruition, of those ideas coming into fruition. Because if you are afraid to tell it to someone, you're limiting your chances of someone saying, hey, I'd like to partner you with you on that. I'd like to help you out with that, right? So you have to find a balance that you're comfortable with, and it's a personal choice. But I think, the older and more experience you get, the more you realize that just sitting on all your ideas is going to go nowhere, because 10 years later, you'll see someone doing something similar that you never showed it to. They just had a similar idea. They had the same idea. It happens, right? And every time you see something that seems similar to something else, it doesn't mean they stole it. They may have literally had a very similar idea and concept, and they're the ones who actually went ahead and executed on it. So it's a personal balance.
And also expanding on that, one thing, like you've been to the conventions. I saw you at SuperCon before. One thing that I was told is a problem with asking for mentorship and sharing ideas that I found is that if you go to an expert, like say you're releasing a book or you're releasing a movie or something, and you ask an expert who happens to have published some similar stuff that you or you just happen to like them for advice on that sometimes they'll just flat out say, I can't critique this because I'm writing a similar book already.
Yeah.
So if I do that, I can get accused of stealing your idea, or you can get accused of stealing my idea.
Yeah, and that's a legitimate thing for them to say. And frankly, if someone takes that attitude, they're doing you a favor then, because you stay away from it. And that does happen. There are some people in the industry who will not take pitches at all, period, unless they've solicited them for that very reason. They don't, they've got lots of ideas, and there's a 50-50 chance or a 20-80 chance, whatever, that they already have an idea that's similar to the idea you're about to pitch them, and therefore they won't take pitches. So, there's a lot of personal opinions there, but I think that in the end, the other thing you can check on is people's reputations now, easier than ever. Again, because of the internet, because of social media, before you would reach out to someone as a potential mentor, you can research them. You can see what people have said about them. You can find out other people they've worked with and get a sense of what their reputation is. And the people who do, step on or steal ideas, the word's probably out there that they've done that before. And the people who have done a great job and been, reliable and honest, their reputations precede them too. So you want to do the research beforehand of who it is you're going to be pitching to and feel comfortable that they're reliable.
So for promotional posts on social media, like pictures or video, would you recommend, so that people don't steal your content, that you watermark it with like a business, or your face says otherwise, right?
Yeah, it's again, it's a personal preference, and it's a tough issue. Like, because I think that with hashtags now, it's kind of cool, because what you could do is, you can put a hashtag or something over it that's kind of like a watermark, but doesn't look like you're really overly trying to protect it and make it. You can do something to it where it's clearly identifiable, so that if someone does, take it off your account. Obviously, the golden rule is to share properly, as you share people's stuff with attribution, right?
Yeah.
That's the right way to do it. It doesn't always happen that way. So yeah, if you can work something in there that it's clear. Now, if it's a project that's unique to you, no one else is going to be able to claim, well, I'm actually shooting the exact same movie, in the same street as you are. So there is some sort of a path to ownership there. But if it's just generic stuff, you could put a hashtag or your Twitter, your Twitter handle or something on it, that looks more like it's part of the content and less like you're trying to protect your copyright.
So I've seen some films get released on Facebook, and then another page will literally download the film, put some text above and below it, like girlfriend issues, share if you like, or whatever, and then that will go way more viral. Is there a way to, to redirect those views, or to contact that person?
Well, if it's copyrighted material, I mean, there are takedowns. You can report that person, and you can send Facebook or whatever the platform is DMCA request to take it down, right? So there are things in place for copyrighted material, and technically everything's sort of copyrighted. So, you could do that.
Jack, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I just when you talk about, I just remember in 1999 the first case about viral promotion, the Blair Witch Project. Do you remember?
Yes.
And in the time when doesn't appear Facebook, no internet was at the beginning, and it was a good idea, viral promotional, genial, very very incredible. How it was a very short case. No, it is a real documentary. It's a real story. Nobody knows, and when you go watching the movie, it's a rubbish. Well, I think is personally, today you have to choose what is a better way to make a promotional about your movie. In our case, we choose to don't show not so much things until the trailer release, because if I show everything before, when I show you the trailer, you say, okay, nothing news, nothing. I just see the pictures. After the movie, after the trailer, maybe some making of pictures, maybe, but it's difficult to find a very very powerful way to create a case, create a viral promotional.
Well, you could. I mean, in an instant like that, you could do interviews with some of the actors, disheveled, dirt all over them, right after the stunt, talking about, oh my gosh, what I just went through. If my agent had told me I'd be doing this, I wouldn't have made this film. There are ways you can create maybe interesting stories behind the scenes without revealing any actual footage from the movie or any actual stuff. It's
I was going to ask Jeff and Jack to give us their final parting words of wisdom,
Okay.
as well as where you can find them. So let this be your tip.
All right, so this will be my words of
This is
wisdom.
why they call me the moderator.
So as I mentioned, I'm the CMO of .club Domains, one of the domains. One of the ways to cut through the clutter is to use a clever domain name to promote your project, even if it's redirecting to a Facebook page or to social media, or if you have a YouTube video, because it makes it easier for people to find it. So for example, my book is called Everything I Know About Business and Marketing I Learned from the Toxic Avenger. I want you to go to Amazon to buy the book. The link on Amazon is long. If I want you to search for me on Amazon, you're going to see other books and other people, and you might get distracted and buy them. So I registered toxicavenger.marketing, relevant to the book's title, and that redirects exactly to the book's page on Amazon, so you're one click away. A lot of actors and actresses even use a .club name to point to their Facebook page. So ViolaDavis.club goes right to her Facebook page. So instead of searching for Viola Davis and there's 20 women with similar names, she can ensure that you get right to her page. So there's a lot of choices in domain names today, and you might think about finding a clever domain name that's related to you or your project, and have that point to where you want people to go, even if it's not a website. It could be to your social media page. It's a good tip on marketing. You can find me online. My Twitter handle is @Sass. The book's website is Everything I Know About .marketing, blah, 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 blah. You'll find me. Thanks.
All right, thank you all.
It's a marketing session. I would be doing a disservice if I wasn't here marketing, right?